Welcome back to the Postpartum Plan podcast. This podcast is designed to support and empower you through postpartum. Whether you're expecting, in the early postpartum days, or beyond, this space is for you. I'm your host, Madison Fugere, a dedicated postpartum doula and pediatric sleep consultant, striving to help parents feel confident and supported in their parenting journey. Each week, I'm sharing practical tips and expert advice to help you navigate all the postpartum things with confidence. Well, as much confidence as you can. Let's embark on this journey together, making your parenthood as serene and supportive as possible. Aly is a mom to 2 boys in Nashville, Tennessee, and a certified sleep consultant. Aly helps exhausted moms get the sleep that they need and deserve by teaching gentle, hands-on approaches to sleep training. Hi, Aly. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so excited to have you join me on the podcast today.
Yay, I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
We were just talking about how I posted on like the graduate page for our sleep agency, I guess. I don't know what we would call it, like the certification program, I guess. And was trying to get some more people to come on and join me because I think that sleep is like the topic that everybody wants to know about. And so I'm excited today because we're tackling the like stigma of sleep training while also tackling like what sleep training really is and like explaining that sleep training doesn't mean that your child needs to cry it out. And so I'm super hyped to tackle it because I think that's been a topic that's on the list that I've had for like since the beginning.
Absolutely. I think it's
Yeah. So
like the first thing that like moms that I talk to are like,
yeah.
first of all, I'm not comfortable with cry it out. And I'm like, oh, good, me neither.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so true. Would you like to like tell everybody a little bit about yourself and like how you got into the sleep world and all of that? And then we'll kind of jump into the topic.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am in Middle Tennessee, kind of outside of Nashville, and I have 2 boys. One is a little over 2.5, and then I have an 8-month-old. But when my toddler was like a teeny tiny baby, he slept pretty good overnight, but he did not nap, and it was awful. Like I worked from home, and it was just like I dreaded naps. Like every single day, it was like this is going to be this awful thing. I would pace around the bedroom and like try to get him to go to sleep, and he just wouldn't. Like maybe if he fell asleep in my arms, as soon as I laid him down, he was up. And it was terrible. And I was probably just crazy because I expected different results every day. Like I was like, oh, today he'll just nap. And he didn't. And it was awful, awful, awful. And I just like cried and would just like sit outside the bassinet crying along with him or fall asleep in the floor next to him. And so I knew something had to give. And I had listened to a podcast when I was pregnant with him, and it was more of like a birthing, like pregnancy, new mom podcast. And they had a sleep consultant come on, and I had listened to it, and I was like, that's kind of interesting. And as I'm going through this and like just like hating nap time, I remembered that. And so I reached out, and she was great. I ended up working with her. We ended up getting his naps to be more consistent and just really lengthened those naps to where like he got a good nap in, and I felt better. I could function more. It was just
Yeah.
like a better time with my baby. And so then when I was pregnant with my second, I was just really going through this thing of I'm working full time, but I'm not like, I want to do something more meaningful, and I want to be able to give back and help moms. And motherhood is just like this wild ride and so hard. And so I just kept racking my brain, like, what could I do? And sleep consultant and like helping new moms navigate sleep and feeling better just kept coming up. And so I reached out to the Centers of Pediatric Sleep Management and fell in love with the program, really liked it. Went through it while I was pregnant with my second. I ended up graduating like 2 days before he was born.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
but it was kind of cool because I got to like practice and do all the things on him when he was, really, really little, and set him up
Yeah.
for good sleep, and then start working with families and just be able to help.
I love that. I think that it really is a topic that so many people struggle with. And I think that because you can relate to it, I think people are really appreciative of that,
Mhm.
right? And knowing how like much of a struggle, I guess you could say it is to like have a baby that's not sleeping and to have like tried everything and trying to find results but not finding them. And then, like you said, finding a sleep consultant that you work with and feeling like, oh my gosh, I finally have success. It's such a full circle moment to be like, okay, I'm going to do that for other people now. So I'm sure that feels like so fulfilling.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. And I get it.
Yeah.
Like I've been that mom and that just doesn't sleep and but it doesn't have to be that way. You know, when you're pregnant, you probably hear all the time like moms hear it, oh, you'll never sleep again. And like you can be a mom and sleep. You don't have to wait until they're like in kindergarten or anything like
Right.
that.
Right. I think that's so true. And like people wear it like a badge of honor. I've said it once and I'll say it a million more times. But like, yeah. And I think people do. They're like, oh, like sleep now because you won't sleep later. And it's like, well, why
Hmm.
not? Right. I love
Yeah.
that. So like, yeah, why not? Right. I mean, let's dive into it. When people hear sleep training, their brain automatically goes to, I'm putting my child in a room, I'm closing the door, and I'm never going in. And they're just going to scream until they fall asleep from running out of energy. Um, and they assume that this means hours on end and days after days of screaming. And I think the first thing to say about that is obviously that that's not the only option. Today we're going to talk about like alternatives and that oftentimes when you work with a sleep consultant that it doesn't mean that they're offering the cry it out method. But I also wanted to just like mention because I don't think we're going to tackle it as much that like if you do choose to use a cry it out method, there is studies that are showing that like, it isn't the worst thing that you can do, right? Like, it isn't this traumatizing situation. And I think Center for Pediatric Sleep Management that we went through really highlights it really well that, we want to meet families where they're at and like not discriminate or like alienate people for choosing the way that they want to do things. But most parents, like you said, come to you and me as well and are like, I'm not comfortable with cry it out. And so, yeah, how does your response go to people and what kind of things do you offer up to people that, help them to still get success while not having their child cry it out?
Sure. I think that you said it very well, like meeting them where they are and everything, and just like the stigma around sleep training. And so I almost like find myself not wanting to use the phrase sleep training because people have such a negative connotation around it. And
Right.
it doesn't have to be that. And so I love that we're going to dive into that today. 'Cause that's pretty much like the first thing that I get on a call with someone and they're like, I just need to say, like, I'm not okay with this. And if it's not cried out is not something that I would suggest or recommend. But if I have a
Right.
family that are like, I want to see results tomorrow, like, or within a few days, like, I don't care if they cry, like, I just want to sleep, then I'm all for you and I will
Right.
support you. But I think that, everyone just goes to sleep training and cry it out and they just don't realize that there's other options out there or what are those options. And
Right.
so kind of like when I'm talking to them about it doesn't have to be cried out, like my number one reason for having other gentle sleep training methods is if my mommy heart isn't okay with it, then I can't expect yours to be, right? Like, and if you're not totally on board and feeling confident and comfortable with the plan, then you're not going to want to do it. Like, I can give you this plan, but if you're not on board with it and you're like, I really just don't want to do cried out or, whatever, and that's what I recommended to you, then you're not going to be excited about it. You're not going to show
Right.
up. You're not going to be consistent. Like you're just going to be like, "Ugh, it's this thing. Like I don't want to do it." You're going to go into it with this negative feeling surrounding it. And so I want to take that away and do something that the mom or the dad is actually on board and comfortable with. That way they show up excited and they're ready to put
Yeah.
in the work and they know like I'm doing this for my kid and it's going to be okay.
Yeah. I think that literally almost word for word, the two words that I use for when I'm supporting clients and that you basically just said is confidence and consistency. Like no
Mm-hmm.
matter what you choose to do, like if we reflect back on what you said you were doing like with your little one, right? Bouncing around the room, holding and rocking, moving this, doing that. It's hard because a lot of the time, like you said, you're like, oh, this time it'll be it. This time it'll be it. But if you're not doing the same thing consistently, children don't know what to expect and they don't know what to expect for themselves, but also what you're expecting of them, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
like, how am I falling asleep? Am I supposed to be falling asleep? What am I supposed to be doing? We get to
Yeah.
that overtired point and it's just like, jumping off a cliff. We're long gone at that point, right? And so I think that confidence and consistency are so huge. And you're right. If you're being told to do this sleep training method that you're not comfortable with, not only are you now going to be not confident that it's going to work. You're going to be uncomfortable and you're not going to be consistent because maybe during the
Mhm.
day you're feeling great about it, but in the middle of the night you can't handle it and you're picking baby up when you're not supposed to be, or vice versa. And so I think that in those moments, yeah, it can be really, really hard. So I love that as sleep consultants, right? We're able to come up with methods that meet the parents' needs while also meeting them like with how they want to approach the situation, right? So do you find that people are often coming to you wanting absolutely no crying? Because I hear that a lot too, and I feel like that's such a hard like thing to tackle.
I think that it's kind of a mix. I get some parents that I think it's pretty 50-50 that they don't want to hear any crying at all. And then, of course, as you know, with sleep training and getting them to practice falling asleep, we kind of got to get out of their way a little bit and give them some space. And with that comes some crying and just reassuring them that that's okay. But you don't have to go in there and close the door and let them cry for hours and hours and hours. That, there's things that you can do, and it's okay, like their crying is temporary. But I feel like mom brain just poof. But
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of.
I think that the timed things are more aware, right? People know a lot about like the Ferber method or things like
Hmm.
that. So I hear people come in a lot and say like, "Oh yeah, we've tried the Ferber method," which for those of you who are listening and don't know, like there's a method out there that people have kind of spread around the internet that they works for some,
Hmm.
is essentially the idea of like putting your baby in their crib, leaving for I think it starts with like 2 minutes or 5 minutes or something. And then after
Yeah.
that amount of time, you go in and then the timer is longer and then you go in and then the timer is longer. And so a lot of people will come to me and be like, "Oh, I tried that." And I'm like, "Okay, but like what
Hmm.
does tried that mean?" Right?
Hmm.
Because confidence and consistency. Okay, well, we've only tried that for like 3 or 4 days. Like we tried that for 2 days, but we were out and about running errands during the day, so we couldn't do it for naps. So it was just bedtime. And my husband did it differently than I did, and all of that kind of things I hear. And I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, well then you didn't really try it.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part because I know that people that are reaching out to sleep consultants are overtired, exhausted parents who may not have the energy to feel
Hmm.
like they can give it a true shot. But I think that with the coaching of a sleep consultant and the expertise, being able to say like, okay, yes, I know this is hard, but like push through and
Hmm.
then there's a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think
Hmm.
that's the super important part. There was actually like a post in the group the other day of our Facebook group, and someone and I think Jane had, the founder, had responded saying something like, as sleep consultants, it's not just the information that we're providing, but it's the true coaching and the support that is the, gold star. Being able to support families and give them that intel and that information in the moment, I think is really what makes people comfortable and what they're hiring a sleep consultant for. Because, yeah, you can find methods online, right? But like,
Hmm.
okay, how do you know how to navigate them? I think is that important part.
Hmm. Yeah, kind of like shutting down all of that noise and just having like a really clear guideline of what to do and what to expect and how to get through like the thick of it when you're going through the
Absolutely.
process.
Yeah. And do you find that people come to you and are like, "Oh, I've tried like so many things," and they don't see the success as well?
Yeah, I've had some people come and they've tried like a different program, like one that it wasn't like a custom sleep plan, but they bought a sleep plan online and they were like, it
Right.
just didn't work.
Right.
But then we were able to see success. And I think part of that is, our method is really diving into what are they doing, what have they tried, but what are their goals and needs around sleep, right? Like, and we want to build that plan based on that. That way we're actually getting them the results that they want. Like, people have different goals. I have some families that are like, I just want to wake up once in the night,
Yep.
or, I only want to, I want this. And so they're so specific in what they're looking for that, yeah, you could go buy a plan online that's just generic for all 8-month-old babies.
Right.
But that's going to look different depending on what your schedule is. If you're in daycare, if you're working, like
Yes.
if you're nursing, if you're not, like all of that is so circumstantial. And I think that people just think like, oh, this is the plan I need to do, when it really could just be like, this is your plan and this is what will help you see the results that you want.
Absolutely. And so I know that you work with a lot of families that, like you said, do come to you and say, we don't want to cry it out. And so we offer more gentle approaches and
Yeah.
options to those families. Do you want to kind of like explain to people what some of those might be? Obviously, we don't have to give them word for word all
Yeah.
of it, but
Yeah.
just kind of giving them an understanding
Yeah.
or like an overview of, what kind of options are actually out there, because I do find a lot of sleep consultants, and I've had people come to me say, we hired somebody and they said it wasn't going to be this, but then it ended up being that. And like, okay, this person said that they would help my child and they wouldn't let them cry, but once we paid and got into the program, like that wasn't the case, or vice versa. Like there's just a lot of, I think, un like unfollow like things are not followed through. Like the promises are not
Hmm.
met. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. I'm
Yeah.
tripping up on my words today too. Yeah, the promises I feel like that people state sometimes aren't fully met. And so I think that people having a little bit of an understanding of, okay, well, what kind of methods are going to be offered, I think can be really helpful
Hmm.
to those types of people.
Yeah, so I am currently in the process of transitioning to like primarily work with toddler families, although I still
Yeah.
help, like the teeny tiny babies. I'm working with two 8-month-olds right now, actually, but kind of in that transition to like work with the toddlers. My little boy is like 2.5, and it's just a fun age. I've really, really loved it, and I found I really like working with toddler families. And so I'll answer your question, but I'm going to kind of break it up into two little
Yeah.
parts where it's like how I tackle it for the little babies, and then like what I really do with the toddlers, which I just get so excited about. Um,
Yeah.
but I think a lot of it is in the setup and kind of like what I talk to my parents about and how I build up like or what I do before we dive into the plan. And the babies, you can start implementing those sleep training methods like pretty soon, and you can see those results a little bit quicker. After a few nights of going through the methods, being consistent, and I'll dive into the methods too in just a minute. But you can kind of dive in a little bit quicker. With the toddlers, I really want my parents that I'm working with to slow down a little bit and really like look at what they're going to do, but build that up for the child before they start doing it. Because if they don't, like, I personally hate change. And if you tell me, like, in 3 hours at bedtime, it's going to look completely different than it did last night, like, probably going to freak out a little bit and you're going to get big pushback. And those toddlers have really big emotions. And so I want my families to just like set them up for success and taking a minute first before night one, we're doing this method and having like a family meeting, but really communicating with their toddler, involving them in the process, kind of let them know what bedtime is going to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Start kind of focusing on your routine before you're diving into the sleep training method and spend some time with that. Um, give them lots of reassurance and praise and just take the extra, like, 3 to 5 days or the first week before we start diving into the method to kind of start setting these things up and doing little things here and there. And
Yeah.
I, kind of give that like a pre-plan to my parents that I work with. That way it's not such a like night and day light switch whenever we
Mm-hmm.
do get to the part where we are going through the sleep training methods. Um, and I kind of, the methods that I choose really is just based on the family, right? So,
Right.
like, the first step after they agree to work with me and we've done all the paperwork stuff is they need to do an intake form. Like, I want to know what their schedule is, if they're in daycare, and, it's going to be a little bit different for the toddlers and the babies, but really get like a picture into their life when it comes to their children, their day to day, and their sleep.
Yeah.
And again, what are those goals and needs, and what are they looking for out of this? And that helps me kind of decide what method would be best for them, and kind of going back to, are you okay with some crying, or are you like that family that's like, I don't care if they cry at all, um, and kind of just go from there. And then, I also manage their expectations too. Like, we can definitely do a gentle approach, but there's likely, going to be some crying. You're doing something different that your child's not going to be used to, and
Yeah.
they're adjusting. And luckily, children are like very adaptable, and just kind of they're practicing falling to sleep on their own, and they're learning, and it's not something that you're doing to them. And it's kind of funny, I didn't realize like how much you have to like teach children. Like my toddler will go and like something as simple as try to take his shirt off or try to put his shirt on. I'm like, oh my
Right.
gosh, like he has to learn how to do this. And that's how it
Yeah.
is with sleep too. And so I think just be really transparent with my families up front and going through those expectations and what we're going to do together. And of course that you have like my complete support, and the person to hold you accountable and cheer you on. And then the method is like, it's not just a big shift. You're going to still be, I want you to still be showing up for your children. I want you to be that source of comfort for them. Like, I don't want you to just go in there and close the door and like figure it out, right? Like,
Right.
they come to you when they're upset, when they're scared, like if they just want to snuggle, like you're that person, and I want you to still be that person for them. And kind of like with my babies, they're like, oh, can I never hold my baby while he sleeps again? Like, I love those snuggles. And I'm like, no, like, get sleep in a good spot. And then, yes, like, I want you to still get those snuggles with your baby or your toddler. Like, I want you to be that source of comfort for them. But what I want to work on is start pulling back gradually that support and getting them to sleep. And
Right.
so, in the beginning, it's not going to be that big of a shift. And then as you're working through the plan, like, we're going to slowly start pulling back those aids or that support that you're giving your child to fall asleep. That way they can learn that skill and be able to fall asleep. And when they do wake up in the middle of the night, not have to cry out and not have to need you to get back to sleep because they
Yeah.
got it. Like, they're totally good.
Yeah. I think that's such a good explanation because yeah, it is that big change and like especially if the little one's not expecting it can be really, really overwhelming. Like as adults, we hate change often, right?
Yeah.
So being able to kind of like truly set up those stepping stones and explaining that to your child can be an absolute game changer. Um, I love that you mentioned that. And yeah, being able to kind of slowly bring that back. And I think that question of like, do I get to hold my baby? Do I get to do this or that still is a question that I get all the time. And so I think being able to reassure parents, yeah, you're teaching them so much. Yeah, they may cry, right? Like you're learning these things. All of these different things are so important. And I think questions that parents worry because at the end of the day, parents just want to do what's best for their child and they don't know exactly what that is, but they're just doing their best to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think that, yeah, supporting them and explaining the process and explaining with little ones, I work with a lot of little ones, and I'm often telling parents, like, yeah, they're crying, but like that's how they communicate. Even with my postpartum
Yeah.
clients, explaining that, like, okay, but like listen in. How are they really sounding when they cry? What kind of like what do they end up needing? Okay, now you can associate those together because oftentimes
Mhm.
their cries sound different, whether it's different vowel sounds or pauses in between, or, loud or quiet. Sometimes I even tell parents, as silly as it feels, to voice memo or record their baby when they're crying in the moment. And
Mhm.
then go back and listen to it once you figured out what the issue was. Like, okay, I don't know what's wrong with my baby. I'm just gonna like voice memo. Okay, they were just overtired. They finally fell asleep. They were exhausted. They napped for 2 hours. Okay, I'm gonna go back and listen to that now that I'm in a sound mind and not cortisol high. um, and listen and be like, oh yeah, like in the moment, my adrenaline, my cortisol was going crazy. And so I didn't know what was wrong. But like now that I listen to it, oh wow, I really hear this like this vowel sound, or wow, they really were like this kind of cry. And so then when it happens again, you could be like, oh wait, this sounds like what I thought it was, right? Um, and so I do that a lot with families, but really, yeah, explaining to them that
Mhm.
this is how babies communicate, or like with toddlers, like this is a new skill that they have to learn. Like you mentioned with the t-shirt, I love that Alan analogy. I can't talk today. Wow. Um, that analogy though, like it truly is. It's so much, it's a big change, and being able to support your little one through it, like what you said, when you are their
Mhm.
person, can be really,
Yeah.
really helpful.
That's why, like, I know we can dive into all the methods and stuff, but I really like to focus on the prep work before diving in because I think it makes a difference and really can set them up one way or the other and hopefully for success because they're feeling really good and positive about it, both on the parent and the kid, right? Like,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Do you want to like explain a couple of the methods?
yeah. And I think it's really interesting that you have them record like the crying and kind of learning your baby's cries and what they need. I think
Yeah.
that's really cool, like a nice little tool, and then they can refer back to it and be like, oh, they're okay. They just need this.
It feels so
Uh,
silly, but especially for my postpartum parents, especially when they're like first babies, they just are so caught up in, oh my God, my baby's
yeah.
crying, something's wrong. And they
Hmm.
immediately jump to like they're hungry, which then can cause an overfeeding, or like, oh my gosh, they're like in pain. And so being able
Yeah.
to like hear the differences can be a world of differences.
Yeah. Nice. All right. So diving in with my little babies and stuff, especially like, me, I was like bouncing around the room and everything. And
Yeah.
so of course, like one gentle method, and some of these like more gradual approaches, they take a little bit longer than, if you were to just do the cried out or extinction method or something like that. But the ones that like absolutely need to be held, they need to be rocked, like they need that motion from you. One way that I or one method that I suggest for my families is the just sit method. And so just being able to hold their baby, so you're still getting that connection. They can still sense you, they can smell you. It's so wild that they can like, they're like little wild animals, right? Like
Crazy.
that they can smell you and stuff. Like that's not a method, but a lot of times people that are room sharing still when they're older, I'm like, move the bassinet or the crib or whatever's in your room like far away from you, because they know you're there.
Oh, yeah.
It's just so crazy to me. But with it, just that, like, just slowing down and just like kind of just holding your baby, and at first like you're still rocking or you're still bouncing, and then over time and over the time that we're working together, you're starting to reduce that motion and getting to where you're just holding your baby and you're not offering the physical, like bouncing, rocking, that movement. You're kind of pulling back on those verbal reassurances as we go along over the course of the 2 weeks, to getting them to be able to fall asleep, one, without that movement, and then two, without you verbally comforting them. And so then they're just falling asleep in your arms with you just holding them, to then where they can fall asleep in their bassinet or their crib, wherever their safe sleep place is, without you needing to be able to rock them to sleep. And then, of course, the babies that can fall asleep, but they need something from you too. There's also the shush pat. So you're still laying them down awake and calm, but then offering them that patting on the back or the belly. If they're, still, of course, you should lay your baby under a year old down on your back, on their back. Geez.
It's okay.
But
We
if
knew
they're
you
able
meant.
to, but if they're able to roll over and stuff, or they're a little bit bigger, then of course, just patting them, offering that verbal shushing as you go along, letting them know, hey, mom, dad, like we're still right here and you could do this. And so they're not feeling abandoned, which of course you're not abandoning your baby if you walk out of the room, but they are getting that reassurance for you that, hey, I'm right here and you're okay and you can do this. And then slowly over time, pulling back again, that support, that physical patting, and then the verbal reassurance to where they can fall asleep on their own. And then to where if they learn how to fall asleep at night without you, then when they wake up in the middle of the night, they're able to fall back asleep without you and be able to connect those sleep cycles and everything. Especially like with my first, I found that I really needed to get out of his way, right? Like he would grunt and I would be like, oh my gosh, I need to like get him back to sleep immediately before he wakes
Right.
himself up more. Whereas like he would just grunt and like go back to sleep on his own, but I didn't
Yeah.
know that. And I was intervening and I was waking him up more by trying to get him back to sleep. Whereas like he would have just gone to sleep. And so for my little babies and stuff, like just get out of their way, give them space to figure it out. Um, and then there's also like you talked about the Ferber method and stuff, which is like kind of taking a smaller interval of time and then extending it as you go along. We from CPSM have a different take on that, where it's you're setting yourself, 10 minutes, depending on the age, or
Yep.
15 minutes or 20 minutes, like a determined amount of time that you're going to let them lay in their crib and practice falling asleep before you go to them and try to just reassure them that mommy's here, it's time to go to bed, we love you. And then, you know, resetting that timer. And then hopefully during that time, they start to settle even for, a few seconds. And then you reset the timer. And I think that that is a good way to kind of manage if they're okay with some crying, because you're going to get the quicker results. But
Right.
you also have something in your mind that I'm not letting my baby cry for an undetermined amount of time. Like they're not going to cry for hours and hours and hours. Like I know if my baby is still super, super, super upset in 15 minutes.
All right, we are back. If you were listening a second ago and it got super robotic, I apologize. We had some weird technical difficulties, but we're back. And yeah, so we kind of like, I think pretty sure we finished tackling all of our, few topics for baby sleep support when we're talking about gentle approaches. Do you want to go in and give us like a quick little rundown on the, older kiddos, and then we'll talk
Yeah,
about how people can get in touch with you?
absolutely. So with my little toddlers, which I love They're just so fun. I work with a lot of families that are mostly transitioning from co-sleeping to their own safe sleep space, like whether that is like their crib or their mostly their crib or their own room instead of room sharing.
Yeah.
And or those moms and dads that are like laying down with their toddlers to be able to get them to fall asleep, right? Like that's primarily like the toddlers that I'm working with. And so my go-to is the chair method, which again is like all about like showing up where your kid is. What does your kid need? Right now, they need you to fall asleep. Like they need you to be in the bed with them, or they need that physical touch from you. And so we want to prep them beforehand and really go over what to expect and start setting them up um, for that success. But then when you're ready to sleep train, like and going through this chair method, kind of tweaking it a little bit. That way you're not just like, well, I'm not laying in your bed anymore. I'm like over here in a chair, right? So like,
Right.
or you're not laying in bed with me. Now you're in this whole new bed. And so maybe that looks like taking a step back from just like automatic expecting them to just sleep in their bed to you're sleeping, if they're used to sleeping in your room, like you're sleeping in their bed now. And then going from you're sleeping on a mattress in their room to gradually like pulling back as much as they're needing from you to then where you are in a chair and you're slowly moving yourself further away. That way they know you're right there. You're right next to them. They're hearing your voice. They sense you. And as you're pulling that back, they're falling asleep more and more on their own and less needing that physical or verbal reassurance from you. And like other little like fun ways, like, some toddlers, they need a lovey to sleep with. Like maybe giving them something of yours, like a scrunchie that smells like you, or like one of your t-shirts or something. That way, like, and make it a big deal. Like, hey, you're going to get to sleep with this. Like, mommy's right here. Like, this is so you feel close to me. And, just finding like little ways to make them more comfortable with the plan as you're less and less supporting them to sleep.
I love that. Yeah, and I think it is like remembering that they are a little human, they do need that support, but
Yeah.
also like they're so capable, you just have to be able to like give them the right tools in order to accomplish
Mhm,
it, right?
mhm.
So I love that. Like, and the special idea of like, oh my gosh, giving them something that's yours. I think that
Yeah.
children love that excitement. So that's awesome.
Mhm.
So cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Are there any other specific methods that you wanted to kind of share that you offer to families when they come looking for some support?
I think those are the big ones, and it really just like depends. And sometimes I find like kind of doing a mix, like, like taking a spin on the chair method, like whatever they're needing to get through, um, to see the results that they're wanting and make the
Right.
transition as smooth as possible. And in the beginning with as less change as possible to where then you are seeing those results. And of course, like these gradual methods, like they're going to take a little bit longer. If
Hmm.
you're wanting results tomorrow, but you're not okay with crying, then kind of having those conversations with the parent too of,
Right.
you're going to show up for your kid and it's going to be okay, but it might just be a little bit more gradual as you're building them up and working through the process to where then they have the skills and that foundation set of being able to sleep independently.
Yeah, I think realistic expectations is huge
Hmm.
for the children, but also for the parents,
Hmm.
and being able to kind of know what the timeline might look like can be really
Yeah.
reassuring because then people are like, okay, I'm doing the right thing, or, you know, I really do need to stay accountable. I do need to stay consistent.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that's huge. Awesome. Now, you'll have your information in the show notes below, but if people wanted to work with you, do you want to kind of tell us a little bit about like what that process looks like and how they should get into contact with you?
Yeah, so I have Instagram, which is probably like the easiest way to reach me. I am at Aly, ALY _ sleep consultant. So Aly _ sleep consultant. And if they send me a message, then I would be happy to talk through whatever their struggles are. One big thing that I like to do is like really connect with the family. So I want to get to know you. Like I want to make sure that I'm a good fit for you and that I can help you and
Yeah.
that you're a good fit for me. Like, we're going to be working together for a few weeks. And so I want to, get to know you and, to be friends. Like, let's get weird.
Yeah.
But so then we would jump on a call, and after that, like once we've connected, and then we would talk through the process, see what your needs are, how I can help you, and then after that, we do that intake form, which is just like a screenshot into your life, and then I work on your super custom plan, and we get started.
That's awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for joining me today and for tackling this topic. I think that it's going to reassure a lot of people that there are options out there,
Yeah.
especially those who are like, I'm not going to sleep train my child, and now are probably
Mhm.
hearing this and are like, oh, that could be in my realm. So yeah, I appreciate you helping us to support those who may not have realized that the support existed for them.
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This has been so fun.
Thank you so much for tuning into the Postpartum Plan podcast. I hope that today's episode brought you support, relatability, and valuable insight. Remember, you're not alone on this journey. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and leave a review and share with any of your prenatal and postpartum friends and family. Your feedback helps us reach more parents seeking support. And if you're looking for additional resources, please feel free to connect via Instagram at Serene Moments Doula for constant information, tips, and tricks, or check out my website, www.serenemomentsdoula.com. See you next week.